Yes, okay, I see Lillian's shaking her head. Hi, good morning. My name is Yahaira Ortega, and I'm here with Thrive Alliance. And I'll pass it over to my colleague.
Hi, I'm Petra Sultan. I'm the Senior Director of Programs for Thrive Alliance, and Thrive co-chairs the VEOAC with our friends from San Francisco Peninsula People Power. Diane.
And that's me. I'm Diane Lees with San Francisco Peninsula People Power. And welcome everybody, those who made it here in person, as well as those who came on Zoom. What would be great is, because it's been a while since we've been in person, if we could just go around the table for the folks that are here, introduce themselves. And those folks that are on Zoom, if you could put in the chat your name and what organization you're representing, that would be fantastic. So,
okay, my name is Betsy Colby, and I'm with League of Women Voters, South San Mateo County.
can people hear us talking here in the room, or do we need to speak up a little bit more?
That's good.
Great.
A big thumbs up.
Sarah, do you
That
want
was pretty good.
Oh, have you already gone that way?
to? Not yet, but you should get it.
Sure. Hi, I'm Sarah O'Brien. I'm with the Registration and Elections Division. And the rest of my wonderful team there is online, I guess. And we'll see Jim a little later. I don't know if it'll be in person or online, though.
Oh, break the wall. Okay, I don't know. I'm Joanne, and I'm with Puente de la Costa Sur.
What's your?
I'm a community organizer. Yeah. Sorry, I don't know where to look.
I'm Bernie Mellett. I'm the Executive Director for the Ombudsman Services for San Mateo County.
Hi, I'm Alir Zerka. I'm new to the area. I run a consulting firm, public affairs and government relations called Civica. I came out here from Washington, D.C., where I ran 4 organizations. One was called DC Vote. DC voting rights is very important to me. And that's why I'm here. And I'm very interested in getting to know you all and hearing a little bit more about what's happening in the county.
Well, welcome.
And hi, my name is Maritza. It's nice to see the old ones, so you will say that the ones that I saw before that I know from other meetings, and welcome to the new ones. My name is Maritza, and I am the outreach program coordinator for Nuestra Casa of East Palo Alto. And I'm also leading voting outreach and engagement. So that's why I'm here today. Thank you.
Great, thank you. And I know a lot of people are probably thinking, why do we even need to meet? You know, elections are more than a year, or actually less than a year away, March 5th, 2024. And as we've learned in other elections, it's really important to get started early in planning so that when hopefully the grant money is available, you can hit the ground running once the money's come through. So are there any announcements from Thrive?
No announcements at the moment, but I just want to point out who's in the room. We have Mai from San Mateo County Health. I see Chantel Gonzalez from the elections office. We have Linda Wolin from Supervisor Pine's office, and Thomas Day from the elections office. Ben is from CID. He's our usual. Margie from the League of Women Voters North and Central, and a couple more. Please keep introducing yourself in the chat. We'd love to know who you are and what you do for your organization. No announcements from Thrive at the moment. Just a reminder that I want to say thank you for making a commitment, right, to our democracy. Now that's early enough so we can make a change in March. So really appreciate it.
I actually do have, sorry, one Thrive announcement,
Okay,
which
there
is
you go.
just to remind everyone that we are now have a program called Thrive Rise, Resilience in Shared Emergencies, which is the co-ad for San Mateo County. So community organizations active in disaster, and many of your organizations will be involved with this. And our next meeting is actually going to focus on childcare during emergencies, because there's a fantastic organization that will provide free childcare for people who are working, who need to respond during emergencies, even people like us who are probably called second responders, not first responders. And so we're going to be talking about coordinating that, but you are always welcome to those monthly meetings as well. And you can find out everything on our website.
So I know Jim Irizarry from the elections office is not going to be able to make it now. He'll be here a little bit later. So Sarah, why don't you go ahead with your updates, and then Mindy, if you can, after Sarah is done, start your presentation. That would be fantastic.
Will do.
Blue.
Thank you, Mindy.
She was a voice that popped up.
Oh, well, as it should be.
Yes, it should be. Thank you. Wanted to mention, if any of you live in Millbrae, there is a Millbrae School District special mail ballot election going on right now. So if you're in Millbrae, please make sure to look for your ballot. You should have already received it. The election last day to vote, May 2nd. So if you don't have a ballot, feel free to call our office. We'll get it to you, or you can stop by. Besides that, we're having a small election right now. I was going to mention the EAP, that is the Elections Administration Plan. And that is a required document from the Voters' Choice Act. So some of you are new, newer and new, and so you might not have heard about this. Is that first we did a election administration plan in 2018. And then the law required that we do one 2 years later. So we did another one in 2020. And now we're on the 4-year cycle. So, that we've kind of passed. We did okay in 18 with our plan. We did okay in 20. So we're working on a new one for 2024 that'll be good for 4 years. Basically, it covers the presidential primary and election and the next mid-cycle. But basically, I would love to have input on anything that you really love about, that we're all doing for, inclusiveness and getting other, people who haven't been registered, people who haven't been voting, to get them to come out. Or things that we're not doing. And that could be things we're all not doing between the VEOAC, things you think the elections office should be doing. I can't promise that we'll absolutely do them, but what I can say is we want you to be heard, and we want to see if it's something that we should include for sure. We'll have a chance to, I'll send a draft when it's ready. And we'll then have some consultation meetings, and I'll have groups. It'll be in June. And after the consultations, we'll go back and revise based on those meetings. And we'll have a public hearing in mid-August. And then we'll make some edits, and hopefully at that point it's ready to send to the Secretary of State to be approved. It has two plans in a way. It has the election administration plan that most people don't care a lot about, as far as the part about our machines and how many there are, how they work. I mean, that is kind of set. We have Dominion machines, the ballot marking tablets, and they print. So there's no memory involved. It's all paper. That's the kind of thing. But there's one part that's that sort of the outreach, and that's the vote centers and drop box locations. So, having some ideas, even now, if you'd like to, email us, tell me if you're here, if you have suggestions of spaces that are large, empty, have parking, are accessible, in any community, let me know, let us know. We'd love to take a look at it to see if it would work for a vote center. And also, are there places, now we've already gone above, I think we have a number of like 35 minimum, 40 minimum drop box locations, and we've already gone to like 50. We do more than we have to, but again, if there's some place that is just like, hey, I don't see any coverage within, a couple miles here, maybe it's because there's a vote center that'll be there the last 4 days, but maybe it does need a drop box. So, again, please let us know if you have some suggestions. And that's what we'll be asking in June, as well as about the outreach portion. Does anyone have any questions about that? Okay.
Well, again, I think the outreach portion of the EAP is what the folks here and online are most interested in.
Yep.
Because it really goes into a lot of detail in terms of how do we get to, especially the underrepresented communities in our county, what kind of information is going to go out to the registered voters and how frequently and all that good stuff. So if you have any ideas for additional things that the elections office should be driving, the EAP is the place to put that.
Mhm. And just because we don't include something in the EAP and we think of it a year later, it doesn't mean we can't do it. So, you know, it's not like this is the Bible that we go by and only by it. We're allowed to make some adjustments for improvement. Well, so.
Sarah. Oh, excuse me. Sarah, Miley said Dropbox idea, FDR school at Daly City Pacifica border.
What was it, SBR?
FDR.
FDR
Oh, FDR, okay,
is the
got it.
idea here.
thank you.
Any questions for Sarah, people on Zoom?
Oh, I was gonna mention also just lacking back
Yeah.
real quick.
Oh, yes.
LAC, we met in mid-March.
Sarah, what is a LAC?
Yeah, what is it?
Thank you.
Too many TLAs, 3-letter acronyms.
This is a 4-letter.
That's right. Too many FLAs.
Thank you, thank you. My mind, I haven't finished this copy yet. It's the Language Accessibility Advisory Committee. And we typically meet on the 3rd Monday of some month. I mean, the committees tend to, like this one, we're now meeting kind of in a 3-month schedule. You know, we're all a little different this year, but the meetings are on the 3rd Wednesday typically here for VEOAC. So the Language Accessibility Advisory Committee, we would love to have anyone, you know, join us. We need more people to help in that. And we'll be meeting again May 15th. It's entirely a virtual meeting, so easy to attend. We probably already have it now. We have event postings on our website, and just look at smcvote.org will take you to smcacre.org, and up at the top, click on events, and that's where the meeting info, or contact me. We already talked about in mid-March a little bit about the same things on the EAP. Smaller group, so we could talk about the ideas right then and there, but we'll have time to do that in mid-May too. And then tomorrow is the VEOAC meeting, and the VEOAC is the Voting Accessibility Advisory Committee. And they have been very active in things like we're looking at ADA upgrades to be done before the next big presidential primary election at our office on Tower Road. Our parking lot itself is, you know, like just the smoothness or lack of, you know, would be, it's enough to trip me, and well, I'm klutzy, but you know, it's a very treacherous little pathway on our parking lot, things like that will be adjusted to be more ADA accessible, compliant, etc. So, and tomorrow, and again, the connection is online. It's on our website if you want to join that meeting. It's tomorrow, 10:30 till noon.
Okay, I was just going to ask if somebody wanted to join either the LAC or the VEOAC, they could contact you for information or just look at the events page.
Yep, join the meeting. Come to a meeting before you want to say, I want to be a member of it, but come to one of the meetings. You know, the LAC is meeting for an hour when it meets in May, 11:30 to 12:30. And as I said, the VEOAC tends to meet a little longer, an hour and a half. So those are kind of the time commitments. And, you know, you generally come to like 2 meetings before you say, hey, I really want to be a member.
So maybe, I think with the VEOAC, it's pretty clear there's some specific project that they're working on to improve accessibility of the Tower Road. But in terms of the language accessibility, what kind of things does that committee get to work on?
Anything it wants, as far as anything to do with language. I mean, they have not been the most active, I'd say, of our three committees. So the things that I usually show them some of the things we have for, translated. I mean, there's so many variations of Spanish per se, and we're not able to cover all the, different ways. So we tend to stick with, sort of a formal middle ground. Maybe sometimes it's the advice is needed, like Chinese, should we be going, and we say no at this point, should we be going to simplified instead of using the formal classic traditional Mandarin characters? And at this point, we're sticking traditional. So, things like advice on language things, also helping us find events that are language oriented, because we really want to, it's our limited English proficient audience out there that may not know about elections. So thank you.
And any questions for Sarah on the LAC and the VEOAC? If not, Mindy, I will pass the microphone or whatever over to you. Or something else.
We're so excited to have Mindy Romero join us today for our meeting. It's such an honor to have you here, Mindy. I really want to say, we've had a great partnership in the past, and it's really amazing for you to, and it's quite a joy to hear some of your findings. Dr. Mindy Romero is the director of the Center for Inclusive Democracy at USC. She is a founder and director at the center, formerly known as the California Civic Engagement Project, which is part of the USC Sol Price School of Public Policy. And she is based in Sacramento. She will let us know what kind of research she's been doing, but she's worked with the county in the past before. So it's just a great honor to have Dr. Romero here. Thank you, Mindy, for joining us.
Thank you very much for having me. And I just want to make sure, can everyone hear me
Yeah, one
okay?
second.
Oh, hang on.
All right, go ahead.
Thanks. I was just asking if everyone could hear me okay. Can you?
Now
we
yes.
Great. It was breaking up for me a little while ago. That's why I kept my camera off. If I break up again, just let me know. And certainly during my PowerPoint, you don't need to see me in the corner of the screen anyway, so I can, I'll turn off the video. But just at the outset, I want to say thanks again, for having me. This has been a wonderful partnership. Wonderful partnership with the county, and I mean the county more broadly, right? Certainly with the elections office and being so great to work with, but very much so with the VEOAC and everybody on it, and this leadership, Diane and Petra and Pam and everybody. So this has been a multi-year effort for at least my center and myself to help bring data to San Mateo County, and you all do so much with it. So it's so great to see. I will say I actually wanted to be in person. I was leaving that open, but I was planning to be in person, but I want to give a little PSA for scooters. My adult daughter had a scooter accident yesterday. She's okay, but it was pretty gnarly, but she will be okay. And so I'm here in Sacramento and not driving over to the Bay Area. She's married now, but I'm still mom, and you know how that goes. Yes, I was in the emergency room with her and her husband all day yesterday. She's home resting, he's taking care of her, but I'm on call for anything. Even though right now all she really needs is pain meds and ice cream, but I'm there if she needs it. So hence I'm not seeing you in person, but I would love to in the future come again and see everybody in person. Just wanted to let you know. Scooters are, I'm sorry if anybody has any investment in scooter companies, but they are dangerous. So as a parent, you don't want your child to prove you right after you're telling her constantly, right, not to use those things. But anyway, so I'm going to jump in on my PowerPoint. Let's see if I can share. One moment. Again, just let me know in the chat if you can't hear me. Should be able to see my slides now. Yeah?
Yes.
Okay, great. Let me just get them big. Okay. So I know I have about 10 minutes. You know, and as usual, I have a lot to show you. I'm going to go through it pretty quickly. Happy to share these slides later. And we're doing more research. So also put a plug in for potentially, if you all are good with it, coming back and giving you some more detailed data later. And maybe even doing something more of a workshop so we can kind of, for those people that are interested in diving into the details, we can do that. But for now, so I want to just remind, because I know there are I heard a lot of new folks on the Zoom, that I alluded to that long relationship earlier, but we have actually produced a series of reports that are specific to San Mateo County. There should be an "and" there, but 3 reports, one on the 2018 primary and general elections, a combined report, and then 2, one specifically on the primary, one on the general for the 2020 election cycle. Those are available on our website, and those were commissioned by the San Mateo County Elections Office. Again, wonderful. And of course, Sarah is part of that. But everybody there, in terms of being able to get the data we needed and detailed data that we often can't get from other counties, just a really great partnership there. And they were publicly available reports that are still there as a resource that you can dive into if you're interested in history in the county. The other, and essentially I should say that those reports were focused around the Voters' Choice Act and how the Voters' Choice Act was being implemented, this new model, and still new, in some respects, right, to the county, but looked at turnout, registration rates, voter experience, all sorts of things on the periphery, but also directly related. The other tool we have is something called the Voting Location and Outreach Tool. And here's just a screenshot of what it looks for San Mateo County. It is a national tool. It started in California in the 5 first initial VCA counties, which San Mateo was one of them. But what it is in short, you can go to our website. There's a tab up there. You can't miss it. This says Voting Location Tool. If you're interested, you can get all kinds of historical and current data on San Mateo County. And I just want to make sure everybody knows that it exists. So it's a location tool because it suggests where voting locations and drop boxes could be placed in any county. So this case it's San Mateo, but again, we have it for polling place and Voters' Choice Act counties across the state and counties across the country. You can get detailed demographic and voter history data for that citing or location conversation, but also you can click on these little things here on the right that says additional, sorry, on the left that says additional data, drop down and you'll see dozens of voter history. So turnout, vote by mail, population demographic information, traffic patterns, all kinds of things that you can use for your voting location citing conversations if you're involved in that in your county. And I know the county has used this, the county elections office, but also you can use it for outreach, voter messaging, targeting, all sorts of things. We do not have the 2022 data there yet, but you can right now go back and look at 2018 or 2020 down to the census tract level. So detailed data by neighborhood in your county. So I've already took a lot of time to show you that, but I wanted to show it to you. But the task at hand, I was asked to talk about turnout. I'm going to just briefly give you some information on eligible voter turnout population first, then talk about turnout, and then briefly talk about level of voter representation. So now here comes Mindy speeding through. If you didn't know it, right, there are some differences, of course, in the distribution of the population if we're looking at the citizen voting age or the eligible voter population, those are adult citizens, versus the overall population. So, of course, San Mateo is very diverse, but the numbers and the proportions do vary a little bit when we're looking at adult citizens, and I want to just emphasize that. So what we've got here is that blue line is the these are projections, I should say, here for the voting age population from 2020 to 2040. Hopefully you can see that at the bottom of your screen. And probably no surprise that the blue line is the total population, the white population in the county as it declines over time. These are projections from the California Department of Finance. The green line is Asian American, red is Latino, and then we have the purple line is the proportion of the citizen voting age population that is Black, and then and forgive the term other, but every other group that is available for us. We don't have more detailed data than that from the Department of Finance. But this gives you a sense of over time as you're planning and thinking about things like voter outreach, how the demographics and the makeup of the demographic pie in the county is expected to change, or at least it's projected as of now to change. For registration rates, so we're gonna talk about not only the state of turnout, but the disparities in turnout by race, ethnicity, and age. And I want to emphasize here that one part, not all, but one part of the disparities in turnout, right, the percentage of those actually turning out, is informed by the disparities in registration rates. So if we just look at San Mateo County, the total registration rate going into the November 2022 general election was 84% by our calculations, just slightly different than the official registration rate, but lower for Latinos at 65% or 66%, Asian Americans just shy of 80%. If we look at youth, those numbers are also really low. For time, I'm not getting into all those details, but just want to emphasize as we celebrate so many changes and growth that we've seen around turnout, registration rate, there's still a lot to be done, all right, around registration rate in not only San Mateo, but of course across the state and across the country. And here, these last two bullet points are just showing you the share of actual registered voters as of, again, November 2022, Asian Americans as a group, and we wish we could break that out further, and I could talk in the Q&A why we can't in terms of data limitations. About a quarter of San Mateo's registered voters are Asian American, about 16% of registered voters in the county are Latino. There's two ways to measure turnout. One is the percent of registered voters who actually turned out to vote. The other is the percent of eligible voters, again, adult citizens who actually turned out to vote. I'm going to focus on eligible voter turnout. One of the reasons is because of those registration rates that I just showed you, right? The disparities in registration. If you look at registered voter turnout, especially at the county or sub-county level, it doesn't tell you the whole picture in terms of disparities. We always argue whenever possible or suggest that people look at eligible to understand the kind of the true representation of groups within the voting electorate. Because you can have a high registered voter turnout, but maybe a very low registration rate, right, for instance. On that number, just really quickly, this is the only time I will show you these two. There's another slide after this. It'll show you registered voter turnout. But for the 2022 general election, registered voter turnout was 58%. And if you're curious how that ranks, so to speak, for the county for across the state, San Mateo was 26 out of 58 counties. So right in the middle, if we're looking at just registered voter turnout, total population in each county. For eligible voter turnout, again, percent of those that are adult citizens that turned out to vote, 48.9%. Again, you have a bigger denominator here, right? So it's always going to be lower. And the county was 22nd out of 58 counties. And this, I just want to show you the primary really quickly. The numbers for both registered and eligible are much lower. And just to emphasize, you know, when we look at general election, that is our peak, right? Especially if we're looking at a presidential year, that's where we usually see highest, but numbers are much lower when we look at primary elections. Okay, let's look at eligible voter turnout now here and kind of dive in. So I just showed you our, right over here, 48.9% for eligible voter turnout. So just under 50% of eligible voters in the county voted in the 2022 general. Over the past few election cycles, if we just look by race ethnicity here, for Latinos and Asian Americans at least, Latinos have experienced growth. Both groups have experienced growth in their turnout numbers. If we look at, if we're leading up to 2022 was a different story, but overall have experienced growth. But Latinos have not experienced as much growth as Asian Americans and the general population. So here's just comparing really quickly that 49% I mentioned for San Mateo County compared to the state. They're eligible as a whole. The state of California's eligible voter turnout number, 42%. So San Mateo is doing better than the state. Always a good way to compare. And pretty much in every election, at least certainly going back in the last several election cycles, San Mateo always has higher overall voter turnout than the state as a whole. And this is only for those that are following Voters' Choice Act kind of differences. If we compare San Mateo County, which is a VCA county, to all VCA counties combined, higher turnout, to all VCA counties minus LA, higher turnout, across the board, right? Higher turnout, if we look at it and want to compare this way. But as I mentioned, across individual counties, San Mateo was kind of right there in the middle. Remember when we're just comparing across individual counties, and so that's important. So now we're going to look at history a little bit. We're just going to go back to 2016. So on the far right, we look at blue, which is San Mateo. There's that 49.3% that I mentioned, right? Eligible voter turnout, San Mateo County 2022 general, if you're following me. In the 2020 general, not a comparable election, because we want to go midterm to midterm general. We want to go, presidential general to presidential general, but turnout was 75%. If we look at the most comparable, the 2018 general, we see that overall in San Mateo was 56.9%. So 56.9% in 2018. Clearly turnout went down, right, by, almost 8 percentage points in 2022. I purposely put in California numbers in there just to emphasize that that's something that the state as a whole saw. It was a little bit, the decline was a little bit more in San Mateo County than the state as a whole. But every county had a decline. And obviously that was greatly disappointing for many people that were expecting higher turnout in 2022, or at least on par, right, when we were comparing it to 2018. Now for all voters, now we're just focusing on 2022. Again, blue for San Mateo County, there's at 49.3%. Asian American turnout was 39.6%, Latino turnout 28%. So again, I've talked about historic, disparities period in turnout and registration. Just want to emphasize here, this is 2022. They continue. It's nothing new, but obviously very concerning, right, that it continues. But there are lots of factors that I'm happy to talk about in the Q&A about why this is, and I'll touch on a couple before I end. Here is, if we look back, and because of time, I just want you to see it here, and you can look at my slide deck later. But what I've highlighted is San Mateo. The ones on the left are Asian American turnout rates. The ones on the right are Latino turnout rates. And just to show you over time between 2016, 2018, 2020, and 2022, the change for these two groups. So I just showed you the change for the general population. The same story, right? A decline from 2018 to 2022, also for Asian American and also for Latino. But again, for time, I won't get into detail. Here is for youth, another historically underrepresented group. Again, so here for 2022 green general, youth age 18 to 24, their eligible voter turnout rate was 26.3%. And you can see again, changes over time, right? A decline from 2018 as well. But youth 26.3%, just want to emphasize that. Quite low. It's always much lower than any other age group. And that continues to persist. And maybe one of the questions that this group, if you haven't already talked about, is as everybody declined from 2018 to 2022, why do some groups decline more than others? What can you learn from that, and what needs to be discussed around that specific to San Mateo? Again, a story though, unfortunately, across the state. And this is to show you again, just 2022. We're looking at blue San Mateo by age group, right? You see every age group there at the bottom. As I mentioned, 18 to 24-year-olds by far have the lowest eligible voter turnout of any age group, right? And that's a story that's not just San Mateo, but if you see the red bars, that's California as a whole. And if I showed you any other election, you'd see this very similar pattern, always substantially lower for younger voters. And there are very real barriers to voting and participation, reasons for this, of course. So there's more San Mateo County research to come. Things like, this is 2020, but things like detailed data that we'll be showing you, that will be available if you guys want me to come back by neighborhood. We'll also be adding a lot of that, as I mentioned, to the voting location and outreach tool that's interactive. So just want to give you a sense of some of that. Just really quickly on method of voting, I think I'm just about out of time already, but what I'll just emphasize here is we don't have our detailed data yet for 2020.
Oh no, two.
Diane will take it from here.
But in 2020, and I found great, in the general election, it was 91% of all ballots cast were vote by mail ballots. Oh, am I breaking up?
You're back. You're fine.
Oh, okay. In the general 2022 election, 91% of all ballots cast were vote by mail ballots. But that number can be deceptive because a lot of people do not put those through the mail. A lot of people drop them off at a drop box. A lot of people drop them off at a drop-off location, a voting location site. There are very real reasons why people make those choices, and I could get into that later, but we've done research around that. And of course, still a substantial number that go in person also for very real reasons, right? Needing assistance, other types of other reasons, which I won't get into right now. So just in 2020, you can see that almost 40% of all votes cast were vote by mail ballots dropped off at a drop box. So I just, again, emphasizing that those numbers are different in 2022, but I that's, more to come on that. These are the 2022 general election numbers. Just to say here, like very similar to 2020, again, almost here, 93% of all ballots cast were vote by mail, but that is just, please, stay tuned to understand a little bit better about what that breakout is. And it's very important by race, ethnicity, and age, because there are different use patterns by race, ethnicity, age, Latinos being more likely to use than other groups, at least, in-person voting, younger people, and so forth. So I'm going to skip through this because of time, but that just gives you some age stuff. And then lastly, the share of eligible voters versus the share of votes cast. So those of you that have heard me give presentations before, I always emphasize that those disparities in voter turnout rates that I've showed you here, right? And I'll just focus on race, ethnicity right now. Those differences in turnout rates lead to differences or just underrepresentation for groups, right? So groups having a different share of voters that actually are casting their ballots in an election, a share that's not commensurate with their overall share of the eligible voter population. So in this case, in 2022, the general election, Asian Americans were 26.1% of, let me just move this over here too so you guys can see, of eligible voters, but about 21% of those actually casting a ballot. And Latinos were 20% of eligible voters, 0.6% of those actually casting a ballot. If we were looking at young people, we'd also see it really lopsided, right? Many other groups as well. And then lastly, my apologies for going over. I'm sure Petra and Sarah both knew that I would, because I always do. But just for, conversation, and if you have questions in the Q&A, but in case you don't, I want to make sure that I'm just kind of plating it here. There are very real reasons for lower turnout, right? Despite all of the wonderful efforts by yourself, all of you, it's part of the VEOAC and the county and others, we see these entrenched patterns of underrepresentation. We see progress, but we also see continued disparities. And, there are differences in outreach and mobilization that occur right across groups by race, ethnicity, age, and other statuses. There's historic and current disconnection from the political process. There's demographic likelihoods, predictors, all things that need to be, of course, part of the conversation when we're talking about low turnout and disparities in turnout. So the narrative doesn't accidentally get shifted and become something of, well, blame those, right, for lower turnout, when there really are truly still many barriers in place in our electoral system that creates continues to create these disparities. And just kind of mentioning some of the resources on our website again. And do we have any time for Q&A? Petra or?
We do have time for Q&A. I see. Thank you, Mindy, first of all, for the great presentation. I'm sure everyone has a lot of questions. I have a lot of notes here, but I see a hand raised and I'm assuming it's Mike. Mike, is that you?
Mike Levinson on the phone. Just going back to your breakdown of the other category, if we are going to talk about outreach today, do you at least have data that the election office could use? For example, if we have 10 or 12 languages that we translate into, it would help to know what percentage, for example, of other is which language.
Here, I'll stop sharing, but if somebody wants to reference a chart again, I can easily share once more. Can you hear me okay, first off?
Yes.
Okay, so you were asking if I had turnout data by language?
And particularly in the other category, yeah.
So no, I am. Let me back up for a little bit. So as I'm sure many of you probably know, that in the voter file, the only data that we have on language is, unfortunately, is how people, if they have determined or declared how they want their ballots, right, brought to them in terms of another language. So people have to identify when they register, or let the county elections office, any county elections office in the state, know that they want their materials in a language other than English. And I always emphasize, so we could break out registered voter turnout, not eligible voter turnout, but we could break out registered voter turnout by that language status, right, that's in the voter file. And perhaps the office has already done that, previously. But we always emphasize it to take strong caution in looking at those data, because that population is not a full representation of everyone in San Mateo, or again, anywhere that we're looking at this, of the full population that has that's limited English proficient, or that may or may not, may need a ballot, because there's a self-selection process. A lot of people don't know that they even have that option sometimes, right? Or for other reasons, may be hesitant in requesting their. I know the county and in this group as well does outreach, trying to connect with people and let them know that they have that option. But we generally don't report those data because they are not representative, and there are differences in the sometimes in turnout between people who declare that and people who don't. So hopefully that.
So maybe the best approach might just be to encourage people to request their ballots, as opposed to just looking at the data and reacting to it.
Well, certainly more out. I mean, and again, all of you, I'm sure, have had lots of experience right on the ground doing this. But yeah, certainly every county, there is a sense that just more outreach, more connection is needed to reach everyone that is, possibly could benefit from getting their ballot in another language.
Thanks.
Yeah, is there another question?
Yeah, I see a question here from Miley. It's in the chat and it says, what would you say are the key messages we should convey to the public about the turnout from 2022?
So there's so much more that you all, I'm sure, could and want to talk about, right, when you talk to the public. So I'm not saying this is a complete list, because for all of you too, you're thinking about, I imagine, where you invested your resources. You want to reach everyone. I know everybody here wants to reach everyone, period. But you're also thinking about kind of what worked, what didn't work, who you reached, what, recalibrating for the next election, all that kind of stuff. And there's a lot of detail in there, right, that matters. I would just say that, it's deeply concerning. When we got out of the 2022 general election, we heard a lot of stories across the country about how turnout was high. California, it wasn't, right? It was low and it went down over 2018, and that countered a lot of expectations, at least in the media and press. And that meant that also.
Hi, Mindy, we lost you there.
Disparities across groups. In some cases, we can't rest on our, not that anybody here is doing that, but I think 2022 was a really good reminder that after a few election cycles, when many of us, right, were excited to see just higher turnout, patterns of higher turnout, expectations don't make reality. And so more resources, and that means, right, funder resources, and maybe, from, all different sources, period. Everybody needs to be vigilant. There's still a lot of work to be done, and there shouldn't be, we should be cautious about expectations in 2024.
Mindy,
It'll be higher no matter what, because it's the general election. Sorry?
Just a follow-up point on that one. Do you think California voters felt they had already voted for governor by having the recall election in 21?
Yeah, and the irony in all of this is that we saw much higher, right, turnout in that recall election than anybody was expecting. So it exceeded expectations, right? Which is another thing. And then we went into, some people have speculated that people had just maybe some confusion over, did the election already happen, or election fatigue. I'm not so sure about all of that. I'm not so sure how much that factored in. But I do think that, some of the issues that played into the election nationally didn't play into the election as people were thinking here in California. Some of the ballot initiatives, some of the national narratives that were kind of fueling maybe higher turnout to some degree in 2016 and 2018 and 2020 didn't didn't resonate as much for voters. And I do think that maybe in some cases of funding, and I'm not saying it's San Mateo, but resources were just different. And then of course, the one big thing where you can connect it to the, which I should have mentioned, connect it to the recall is organizations, a lot of organizations across the state have told me that they were just resource poor, period, coming out of the recall, right? So they went through the census, they went through the recall, and then they got to the 2022 election cycle, and maybe they had, they volunteers, funding, those sorts of things, weren't there in the ways that they had hoped. But you can't deny that the national context always does play a role, more and more in the last decade than we've ever seen historically. A lot of that's changing political landscape, changing communication channels, those sorts of things too.
Thank you, Mindy.
Hope that answered your question.
We have time for 3 more questions. There's already 2 in the chat, 1 here in person. Go ahead.
Hi, Leo Zerka. Mindy, thank you so much for that presentation. It was terrific. You listed at the end of your presentation a number of barriers to voting, both registering and also voting. And I wonder a couple things. One is if you were to pick out of that list your top 2 barriers, what would they be? And then also, what is that based on? What's the list based on, and what would be your sort of prioritization of the maybe the top 2 barriers be?
Well, the list I gave you is just commonly recognized, based on research over decades, right? What we understand are key barriers. If you are trying to predict turnout, demographics, unfortunately, are still the #1 predictor, right? And we see a lot of kind of a compounding effect, if you will, when we look at a lot of different groups, where people will have a membership, if you will, in multiple groups that predict lower turnout. So if you are of color, if you are young, if you are low income, right, you find yourself in multiple groups that predict lower turnout. If you are an outreach group and you are wanting to, strategize and understand your county, on the surface, at least, the quickest way to kind of understand where lower or higher turnout would be, unfortunately, as a predictor, would be to look at your demographic distributions. It is, as I said, it's entrenched, right? Everyone wants to see those change, but that's how you can kind of first understand kind of the landscape. And then you try to counter those demographic predictors, right? And change that as much as possible. So beyond that, outreach and mobilization is a key factor in changing that, but those are key reasons for lower turnout. So as I've said to this group before, and I know you all know, our electoral system in the United States is designed where, it's designed in a way that it's the campaigns and the candidates themselves, those that benefit off the political system. They're the ones that are doing the vast majority of mobilization and outreach, right? There's what elections offices do, and then there's what groups like the VEOAC, right, and other nonpartisan nonprofit groups do. But you all are kind of fighting an uphill battle because the vast majority of outreach and mobilization that's already happening by campaigns and candidates is not equitable. So there's an inequitable outreach landscape to start with. So they are outreaching typically, there's always exceptions, but they're typically outreaching to that likely voter model. The people that are high propensity, depending on the election, depending on how competitive it is, they don't want to get everybody, they want to get just the people that they want or need, or they think are going to vote for them, and probably just enough, right, to vote for them. So that you start with an equitable landscape, and there's lots of research that shows that people of color and younger people will receive, for instance, outreach calls from candidates, and often and usually nonpartisan nonprofit groups as well. They will get contacted far less. If they're not a high propensity likely voter, they will get contacted far less. And the reality is that people of color, people from historically underrepresented groups, young people, all are going to be much more likely to be in that low propensity group. And so they're much less likely to get outreach and mobilization to start. So all of you are are kind of facing an uphill and working in a kind of an uphill fashion. And And then, of course, there's just historically kind of interwoven with that, which we cannot deny, is that there's been voter suppression efforts. There's a horrible history in the United States of many groups feeling, and in reality also, being politically marginalized. That has an impact still today in terms of trust and familiarity with the electoral system, that sort of thing. So those are some of the things that I would overall talk about. All of you, I know this group pretty well. I've changed over the years. You're very savvy, you're very smart, you know your communities really well, but some of those bigger patterns are just always there, right? They're just there. And the idea is, how can you counter them? How can you work against them to change them? And as I mentioned earlier, just staying vigilant that despite all the good work, you're always pushing against those patterns, right? That entrenchment over time, because then, things like 2022 happen. So, and not to sound, hopefully not too negative.
Just a quick
I give long answers, so I probably have made it possible to do 3 more questions.
Mindy, just a quick follow-up, maybe. So thank you for that. And obviously you're right about those historic patterns. So you also mentioned an increase in voting by both Asian and Latino groups. Do you have any data with respect to the increase? What was attributed to the increase? Was it a combination of all that work? Was it primarily outreach, or anything that you can say about that?
Yeah, and I went through that really quickly, but it's on some of those historic charts that went back to 2016. And if you look at some of our reports for San Mateo, we talk a little bit, at least in 2020, we talk a little bit about that. We can't, for specific to San Mateo County, we can't make a direct causal connection to anything, especially with the Voters' Choice Act and so many other changes, right? Other electoral reforms that are happening at the same time. In a sense, forgive the term, but there's a lot of noise in there, a lot of good noise, but we can't break it out statistically, or doing a statistical analysis to really for sure know what caused some of that. I will say that one way to think about it, though, is all of the outreach that happened around the Voters' Choice Act in 2018 and still continues to happen. The very forming of the VEOAC certainly had impact, right? You all know groups that you reached. You all have numbers that you can talk about. I can't make a causal connection. I think about if you didn't have the VEOAC and you didn't have the work of folks like Sarah, right, in the county, there were, the numbers probably would have been different. How much different? I don't know. As a researcher, I would be irresponsible if I tried to say anything beyond that. So that's the answer that I can give you. Yeah, and I will definitely share my PowerPoint. I just saw that in the chat. Yeah.
Yeah, we will offer the PowerPoint and the follow-up materials. Mindy, 2 more questions. The first one, maybe you can share a little bit more, a tool or where that people can locate. Marianne Brown from VEOAC here is asking whether she's interested in learning more on additional data on race and neighborhood voter turnout, so specific pockets throughout the county. And she's interested in North County, Daly City, but we have a couple of comments of people who are interested in neighborhoods down south of the county. So do you have data around specific pockets of communities within the county?
Yes. I was just reading. So I just put my website, cid.usc.edu. You can go to the publications page and look for San Mateo. I actually have a webpage just specific to San Mateo, dedicated to San Mateo County because of all the research that we've done. So don't go to the long list of publications, go to the tab that says San Mateo County. And you can also go to the voting location tool, which is right up in the main bar on the main page. You just look up at the top, you'll see it, voting location tool. And like I said, that's the tool I gave you the screenshot of. That it doesn't have 2022 data in there right now, but it gives you, you can look at the citing suggestions, the location suggestions, or you can just ignore that. You can open up all the other tabs and you'll see voter history data for several elections, for total population, for Latino, Asian, American, and for youth. You can zoom down to the census tract. You can look at vote by mail rates. You can look at all kinds of demographics and layer on top. It'll tell you a lot of stories about your county. Many of them I think you already know, but again, for educational purposes, training, all that sort of stuff, the where you can really tell the story, which I couldn't today, of course, is just looking across changes in neighborhood. So when I come back, I would love to be able to, especially when we do a little bit more analysis, as I mentioned, love to have a conversation about changes across neighborhoods. So where then overall, it's kind of hard to break out things when we're looking at the county as a whole or the state as a whole. There may be some stories there for you in terms of neighborhood changes. That might be, again, maybe many of you already know that because you're working in those neighborhoods, but might be helpful at a group level to talk about.
Thank
Just
you.
ask, when do you think you'll have the 2022 data?
The detailed data. You know, give me another month or so. We won't have it on the tool because we're waiting for across the board the new precinct shape files across the country because of the redistricting process. So that's going to be a little delayed, but I can come and show you other maps and give a presentation on some of that detail. So next meeting or 2 meetings from now, obviously I'm going to blow up your agenda in terms of time. So think carefully about when you want Mindy to come back and carve out a good chunk.
Well, thank you so much, Mindy. There was a question about younger voters, and just to give everyone here a preview, the VEOACs for the next couple of months will be focused on specific populations. So we have one coming up on younger voter, youth populations, and you'll hear from people who have been on the ground with the communities, working with youth people. And then we have another one with formerly incarcerated and people on parole. If you're interested in that population as well. I'm positive Mindy has an abundance of information on both of those in particular. So please know that there's more information, there's more time to discuss all of this. The next one will be in July, so just stay tuned. I want to say thank you so much, Mindy, for all the great work and all the insights. And can we just give Mindy a round of applause here?
Thank you for off a video because I was losing my connection.
I hope you can hear a round of applause, but thank you so much,
Thanks,
Mindy,
everyone.
for joining us. We really appreciate it. And if anyone has any questions, I'll link all your information and website in the follow-up materials.
And hopefully we'll get to see you in person next time, Mindy. Tell your daughter to stay off of school.
I would love it.
Yeah.
Yes, well, absolutely. And know that, you know, whether we're doing official reports or not, we're always happy to partner. We're always happy to share data. Always, you know, you can't get rid of us. We're always happy to help. Thanks, everyone.
Thank you.
Thank you.
So, and Diane, we actually, so Sarah might have an update about Jim or Travis giving an update.
Okay.
If Jim, if he is not up there, and there are so many different boxes, if Jim is not there, Travis will be giving Jim's report. Travis?
Yes, it will be me. Good morning, everybody. Jim is at a event welcoming some new employees, so he asked me to give his comments, just some updates on what we're up to over here. So I think that Sarah already mentioned that we have the May 2nd Millbrae school election coming up, which is for about 15,000 voters. So this is just another off-year election for us. I was curious, so I looked it up. Our last actual off year of not having an election was 1989. So it's pretty standard for us to have at least a couple small elections like this each year. We've also been working on some improvements over here at the office. We've been replacing some of our technology that we adopted when we first started the Voters' Choice Act. So our new ballot box GPS tracking system is going to be take up less room in the box. Batteries will last for longer. We found a lot of benefit to those trackers because they not only let us know where the boxes are, they let us watch them come back to the office in real time. So it's a very valuable resource. We also have a new cloud-based solution for our servers over here to let us restore really quickly if anything goes down or if we encounter a hacking or ransomware kind of situation, which has become unfortunately more common at the county and even municipal level. And finally, we have our vendors are now going to be providing 24-hour monitoring to our routers during election time, so we can get things restored back as quickly as possible. This isn't something we've had a problem with before, but we want to be prepared just in case. We're also using this current small election to do a lot of cross training for staff. We have 2 vacancies we're currently filling over here. And so this is all a perfect opportunity to put people in units and get people working on areas that they don't normally handle, which just makes us a more resilient and flexible organization, and also helps if we do have any other vacancies that seem inevitably to pop up around election time, according to Murphy's Law. We're also working on our ADA remodel here at the office building. This is for the elections building at Tower Road, which was built in 1973, and so is very much not up to ADA requirements in a lot of ways. We'll be putting in mainly an elevator to allow people to get up to our main office from our lower level. And we'll also be doing a lot of basic improvements on things like doorways, bathroom facilities, things of that nature. That's all scheduled to be done before the rollout of the March primary work for next year. But again, anticipating delays, we are already working out ways to sort of continue that work, even if we do have election activity going on. And then finally, I think Sarah's touched on some of this already, but we've been doing a lot of outreach work lately, and we'll have more that's ramping up as we get closer to next year's general and primary elections. Last month marked the 1 year of the state working with us on a program to reach out to people who have recently left prison to inform them about their eligibility to register and vote. And we've also been working to replace a lot of the older voter registration forms, which have outdated language saying that certain people can't vote, where that's been changed in the law now. So we're removing those from a lot of places where they haven't already naturally been removed from circulation by people using them. In February, we had the Transition to Independence Resource Fair, which had about 300 attendees. This is an event we do pretty regularly. It always gets a good sized crowd, and so it's, I think, a good way to distribute information. This is for people who, largely for people who relied on special programs through schools, special education, meal assistance, things like that, that they're no longer qualifying for as they're leaving the educational system. And so we are able to sort of meet people at that time and give them a resource to, how they can get out there and register and vote and everything like that in addition to that. And then coming up, we have the high school voter education weeks, something that started as 1 week, then became 2, and now 4. Geometrically, at some point, it will devour the entire year, which I think is all for the good. So this will be the final 2 weeks of April and then September. We've reached out to all the high schools in the county, so at very least they'll be getting materials. But 2 high schools, Terra Nova and Aragon, had events going on that we were able to get space at, where we'll be providing information directly and also registering people on the spot. And those are our major sort of ongoing items. And if anybody had any questions, I could answer those. Oh, and I think you're on mute over there.
Okay, all right. I'm not sure if you know the answer to this yet, but as you know, the county has been great in terms of providing large funds to different community-based organizations to do outreach. And we are assuming that there will be money available for the upcoming election year for the primary and the general. Is that?
That's our assumption as well. Yeah, our budgeting process at the county level is still going on. It's wrapping up this month, but we haven't had any indication that that funding is going to be decreased. So we're proceeding on that expectation.
Okay, and any feeling as terms of when the monies would be available? Because that's one thing that we always run into, where because of the funding cycle and the budgeting years, that the funding comes probably later than what would be most beneficial in terms of getting the outreach. So anything that can be done to get the funding speeded up?
Our the budget presentations happen in June, so hopefully we can get something in place then. Budget revisions are in September, which is pretty late in the game. So I think what would be preferable is if we get the distributions done in summer, and then if any changes in September we could amend at that time if there's any reason to. So yeah, I know it's been not only getting the contracts signed, but also getting the checks actually issued has in the past pushed us later in the cycle than we want to do. So yeah, no, that's definitely on our mind.
Really good. Any other questions for Travis?
Marita, did you? Oh. I don't see any other questions, but there's something about youth groups here, Travis, from in the chat. It was by Chris Bowie. That's what works best for engagement at the high schools, at community colleges, youth groups, etc. that the elections office has found.
You know, in my experience, you know, the schools do a really good job since pre-registration has become an issue to sort of put that out there for people. I've found that in my personal experience, the thing we get the best response to is our student democracy program. I think it interests the students a lot more to be able to sort of get out and get in the community and see what we're actually doing. They have people stand there and talk at them all day long. And so I think that getting them actually involved has been really productive. And we see pretty high numbers every year. Somewhat depends on, you know, the cycle where it falls within the school year as far as responsiveness. But I think it's been a very successful program. I think it's really helped get people not just motivated about voting, but actually, you know, participating in the process at a higher level.
Travis, what is the Student Democracy Program?
So it's a volunteer program that allows students to come work at the polls, usually on election day, sometimes the weekend before election day and Monday, depending on, you know, how many people sign up and how much our need is. But it just lets students get out, and you know, they can't do everything because, you know, we background check and fingerprint all our election employees now because they can access people's voter data. So they do things like, you know, they pick up ballots from the curbside drop off. They help empty out ballot boxes and direct traffic and things like that. Help direct voters to information and materials. So they do have a pretty big role, you know, and at times we've had so many volunteers. We have 5 kids out there directing people to a mailbox. And I think that's great. So we've gotten a pretty good response over the years. Oh, and I'm seeing what grade levels can participate. The students need to be at least 16.
Yeah, so juniors and seniors is what we're on the website. And unfortunately, there's nothing on the website right now. So don't send people to smcvote.org because it basically says coming soon or
Next year.
I saw another question by Mindy. Would like to see more effort to reach parents through schools as well. So outreach to preschools, elementary and middle schools as well.
Yeah, we tried, you know, we've in past done handouts at the grade schools. Last year, we didn't get a lot of feedback on this, but we're trying to reach out again to do a distribution of future voter stickers at the preschools, you know, to give to the kids, you know, with or without, you know, if they're comfortable with it, with the handouts as well. But just even having the sticker on there, I think is a good way to sort of remind parents, you know, to register themselves and to, you know, give their kids these kind of lessons. So yeah, no, I think those are a great way to reach people through school directed things, you know, having kids help encourage their parents, I think is very powerful.
I think sometimes we've also been asked by certain parents, they're not called parent teacher associations, the parent teacher student associations to come and present at their meetings about voting. So that's another way you can get to the parents.
Mm-hmm. Absolutely.
All right, I think we're ready to wrap up here closely. One last question, since you are working with high school students, do you also do outreach for voter registration?
We do. That's what we'll be doing at the upcoming high school voter education weeks. And then we also, you know, at various times throughout the year, especially as the election approaches, we also reach out to schools. And as part of the student democracy program for the schools to participate in that, we do actually have people go out there and give presentations. It's meant to, you know, tell the students what they'll be doing. Not everybody who attends the presentation ends up signing up for the program, but we do also give general information about registration and voting as part of it. So that's sort of just another way we can get out there and talk to people.
Just a big plug for the League of Women Voters and San Francisco Peninsula People Power, who have people who go out to the schools, because there are a lot of them that we need more than elections office. So the groups that go out, good job.
Absolutely.
And this is a great opportunity also to reach out to Travis if you're interested in joining the forces and going out to the schools. Everything will be included in that follow-up information, how to reach to the elections office, Travis's email. But this is really the place to do so. So don't be afraid to reach out to them and get involved.
Travis and I will work together.
Yeah, either Sarah or I, either way, no problem.
Travis is like, not my bill. I will phone number.
Okay, well, thank you so much, Travis, for all the information. I'm sure there's going to be a ton more in the upcoming meetings.
My pleasure.
Yeah, and just one last thing about reaching out to students. I'm actually going to be presenting to the San Mateo County Youth Commission later this month because they have a subcommittee that's focused on voter registration and outreach. So I'm going to try to make the presentation very actionable, and hopefully there'll be some follow-up in terms of working with the elections office or the people power to have them go out into their schools.
Actually, they said they would go out during these last 2 weeks of April. I've been talking to them since January, and
yeah, I don't think they're ready yet to go out, but they will. You know, they're also looking for things they can do during the summer. But if they don't do the April week, they definitely will be doing September, because that's one of the things they'll be pushing. They could do either that one or as part of National Voter Registration Day.
yeah.
So there's a lot of opportunities for them to get out to their schools.
Excellent.
Well, we have about 15 minutes, Diane. Would we want to go, let's go over some of the redistricting
Okay.
quickly, just a quick announcement, and then we'll have some time for people that have already started their outreach plans. We want to hear from you. We want to know what you're doing, because I'm sure everyone else would want to as well.
Okay, well, actually, before I get to redistricting, there's another bill that's before the legislature, which will be a constitutional amendment, which would allow people that are currently in prison for felony convictions to be allowed to vote. So that bill was introduced in February. It's currently in the Elections Committee in the Assembly, and that is being promoted by Assembly Member Brian. So I know that's something a couple of years ago, we expanded the enfranchisement to people who had completed their sentence, because it used to be you had to wait until you were done with parole. Then that was removed as a barrier where you just had to be released. And now they're trying to make sure that even folks in prison, because people in jails with misdemeanors have never lost the right to vote, but people who have been convicted of felonies lose the right to vote until they get out of prison. So
What's the bill number?
it's ACA 4.
ACA 4. Okay.
Yeah, so it's got a little different numbering system since it's a constitutional amendment.
Ah, interesting.
Yeah. And then there's, and this Assembly Member Brian is very busy because he's also introduced 2 bills related to redistricting. There's AB 764, which is the expansion of the Fair Maps Act, which is what is currently kind of governing redistricting in the state. And it only applies to advisory or hybrid redistricting commissions. It's a little confusing in terms of what that, it's just making some improvements to the way that redistricting is now done by the hybrid and advisory committees. Something in there is supposed to prohibit incumbency protection, so that you can't go and redo your boundary not redo your boundary so that you're protecting anybody who's an incumbent in that district. And it also sets some additional processes for appealing district boundaries. So that was, it's in the Elections Committee right now. It's been amended a couple of times. So that one's in the works. And then the other one, which I think we are more interested in, is AB 1248. Also by Assemblymember Brian, which would establish independent redistricting commissions in any county, city, school district, or community college district that contains more than 300,000 residents. So that would apply to San Mateo County. So that bill was forwarded to the Elections and Local Government Committees on March 3rd, because it does involve the different jurisdictions having to spend money to implement that. It will also have to pass the Appropriations Committee. So it's in committee right now. That is, and I mean, then there was one other one where it's AB 453 by Assembly Member Cervantes, which they called it well, it basically what it would do, it puts requirements for public hearings for all kind of redistricting changes. Whereas I guess for now, it doesn't necessarily apply to every single district that decides to change their boundaries and move to district elections. So again, that's another one that's kind of going through the committee. So it passed the elections committee and was and passed the local government committee, and now it's also in the appropriations committee, because again, since it's a requirement of holding public hearings, that's a cost that has to be borne by the jurisdictions that didn't previously have to do that when they established new redistricting. So that's kind of the latest on redistricting and voting stuff.
Great, thank you, Diane. And as I said, these will be included in the follow-up, and I will also include the bills that the Thrive is doing some advocacy around, and like have you sign on to the letters or whatever next steps there are if you want to support.
Oh, well, actually, so is there anybody, couldn't tell if there was anyone from the South chapter of League of Women Voters? Oh, that's right. So, because you're at for some reason, I thought you were from the North County. I get a little confused which chapter people are in. So at the meeting that you folks had last month, there was a proposal for the league to work on moving to an independent redistricting commission for San Mateo County. And was there any action taken on that proposal?
Not that I know.
Nothing happened? Not yet. Okay. All right. So thank you for the update.
And I thought I saw someone from the North League if
Yeah,
they are
Mark Markey
involved
was
in it,
there.
but they were on Zoom earlier. I'm not sure if they are now. No, I don't see them anymore. Some of these bills are quite fascinating, so it takes, I would suggest just go in there and learn a little bit more about them.
Yeah, I mean, one thing that's really nice, if you do want to keep track of these different bills, is when you go onto the legislative website, you can set up my favorites so that you basically can bookmark the legislation you want to follow. So that's an easier way to keep track of things.
I can share my screen now and I can show people how they're doing it. You can see up on the screen, Diane, if somebody wanted to favorite this.
Well, it says add to my favorites.
Oh, here you go. So as you're scrolling, because I know this website, so it's just a California Legislative Information website. And it usually comes up when you're researching any bills, but if you wanted to make an account and then you can add to your favorites, and that's how you can track the different progresses.
The other thing that's really good to look at is the bill analysis, if there's one available, because these laws are really dense and sometimes it's kind of hard to understand what is being changed. But the bill analysis is usually done by the individual committees, and it puts in a little bit more understandable language as to what the bill is trying to achieve.
I see a hand raised. Mike, is that you?
Yeah, just a quick question on ACA 4. I did get an email about it too from the league, by the way. Does that apply to everyone currently in prison, or does it only apply to people who serve time and are out?
No, it would apply specifically to people who are currently in prison. Right
Okay.
now, the law is
First day, as soon as you're
released.
in prison the first day, from that point on, you still have the right to vote.
Right, so basically you never lose your right to vote.
Yeah,
because
I
of-
got it. I just want to make sure it was the way you said. Thank you.
Okay.
Okay,
Anything
great.
else?
Yeah, I mean, that's it on the bills. I know we have about 8 minutes here. We have a tight meeting, as you can tell, and a lot of information, but I'd love to hear just from one or two organizations what they've started doing. I know the league has done a lot and maybe they're still in planning processes, but I'd love to volunteer from here in person and then one online. Please make sure to introduce yourself and let us know what you're doing for the upcoming election.
What you're thinking of doing.
We have something planned. We are going to two high schools.
Introduce yourself so that everybody knows who you are.
Betsy Colby with the League of Women Voters, South County. So we're going to Redwood High School and Sequoia High School and doing a presentation and working with their leadership students to do voter registration.
Are you doing that during these high school voter education weeks or?
One is and one's a little later.
Great.
Great, thank you, Betsy. All right, I see one hand up from Pam D. Jones on Zoom. Pam, go ahead and introduce yourself.
Thank you, and it's always so informative when you have these meetings, and I miss having them once a month. I just need to say that. What we're doing in Bellhaven is we are every time that we get together with our community chats, we bring up a little bit of information about why it's important to vote, just a little tidbits so that we're kind of keeping that at a high level on people's minds. And then, of course, we will be working with the other CBOs in the Bellhaven neighborhood that will be doing door to door so that we can have face-to-face conversations and then follow up later on closer to the elections. Oops.
Great, thank you, Pam. We have 5 minutes left. Anybody else has any questions or any comments or any planning that they want to share out? If not, we will all have a little bit of extra time. All right, Maritza.
I can have 1 minute.
Yes, Maritza, please.
This is Maritza from Nuestra Casa. What I already start working during this time is voting registration for students. So I already had some visits that I'm planning to do to high schools that I'm connect with. And I also reach out to to Sequoia High School. So I'm starting to get connections with them too. I know Betsy does work there. So we're gonna, I don't know, maybe we can do something together, but adding to that, to the voting registration plan that we have at Nuestra Casa, we're also planning for summer and workshops that will include parents information. We will do presentations about why it is important voting and other topics about maybe learning a little bit more about organizing, if they need to organize a group and do a movement. And we're gonna have like 4 classes that we call that. And then so at the end, we're hoping to stay connect with these families so we can do more work around the community, including voting, and they just keep them connected with Nuestra Casa and with the community, right? So that we can get some more work together. Yeah, and more done. So that's the plan for this.
Well, that sounds like a lot on your plate, Maritza. And
I'm so excited. I am so excited. I really love it.
I'm sure that if anybody would like to pair up with Maritza's efforts, she has paired up with the League of Women Voters in the past and many other organizations. So Nuestra Casa has been and is influential in their neighborhoods and their community that they join. So if you're interested in joining the forces with her or any of the work that Betsy's doing, or even with Pam, be sure to connect with each other. I want to thank you all for making the time to meet.
Just one more thing that I forgot to mention before was that we've been working, it was the bills that reminded me, there's a bill that makes the SOS has Secretary of State, has a bill that sort of like all colleges that are funded by the state. So it's community colleges, UC state colleges are supposed to have a community action plan around voting in the next elections. Now, we've talked to people at Skyline, CSM, and Kenyatta that some of the things the Secretary of State said is like, get your messages about election days on their academic calendars. Well, their academic calendars are done like 5 years in advance, we found, and they don't like making changes. So, we'll get there in the future, but we've learned that. But, we have some things going on with those 3 schools. And, if anyone has any contacts at the others, well, we certainly have Menlo. We've talked to Menlo College. And we weren't sure what was going on with Notre Dame. And we also have some technical colleges, vocational colleges that we're talking to. Lose my voice. So that was it.
Thank you, Sarah. So stay tuned, everyone. The next meeting will be in July. It'll be hybrid as well. So join us in person if you want some scones,
If you don't want scones, your problem.
And if you can, of course, we will always have the hybrid option. We really appreciate, I see one last comment from Marion. She says that, is there a league for the North County? Yes, Marion, there is a league for the North County, and they're the North and Central County, and I can help you. Just contact me. The person in charge is like Marty Gator and another Linda, who's not on the call at the moment. So
thank you. Thank
you so much for everyone joining us. I'll see you at the next one. Bye-bye.
Bye.